So it seems that Assassin's Creed Mirage is the gift that keeps on giving. The newly announced upcoming DLC has brought much needed light into my life after what's been a so far pretty underwhelming experience with the newer content in AC Shadows, including the DLC. And there's a lot that I want to talk about. First of all, I'm just so happy that it's back. I'm happy that Bordeaux was given another chance to make more content. And as the rest of the fans probably watching this video, I want them to eventually have their own AAA game with like a full budget and complete creative freedom, because I think that they're the studio that now most understands Assassin's Creed, and until Montreal releases something that makes me believe otherwise, I think that they're kind of like the studio to move forward with the franchise. And there's a lot I want to talk about when it comes to AC Mirage, particularly what certain decisions and additions that have been made to the game imply for the future of Assassin's Creed, and that frankly speaks to the phenomenal effort that the community has made at consistently communicating the wants and the needs of OG AC fans. So first, let's discuss what this DLC is, what's in it, what's being added when it's coming out, and then I want to chat about what these additions mean, beyond this like sudden revival or addition to a 2-year-old game. Because even though I'm ecstatic that AC Mirage is getting more content and getting more attention, I don't think it's like a sign of the times as to what's to come for older games, and maybe that older games are going to start getting more and more support. I think it's just a one-time thing, because the unfortunate reality is that this DLC is happening thanks to the involvement of Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, which alongside other private entities in Saudi Arabia are slowly moving a lot of money into entertainment for, first of all, cultural enrichment, but also to diversify an economy that has been mainly built through oil. They've kind of slowly realizing that oil is a finite resource, and they're trying to diversify how their country makes money and retains wealth. So there's been a lot of moves in the entertainment sector, not just in video games, from Saudi Arabia, both from private and public entities. So just as with comedy festivals, music festivals, football league expansions, buying expensive players, and other forms of entertainment, the country's moving heavily into video games. You've probably seen that EA got acquired by a Saudi company, and Ubisoft is also kind of dipping their toes in this with this DLC that is just a byproduct of that. And quite obviously, Mirage is the perfect game to do it in compared to AC Shadows for a country like Saudi Arabia. Because of the context in which this DLC is funded, I wouldn't take it as a sign that Mirage was just so insanely popular that Ubisoft just had to give more content for it, especially because this DLC is completely free, so this is not something that comes from a direct profit motive anyways, unless it's being funded by Saudi. I don't think it's a sign that Ubisoft is going back to older games and adding free DLC for them, or anything like that at all. I think it's just a bit of serendipity for Mirage and Basim fans like myself. Now, what's interesting to me is not that Bordeaux got the funds to make a DLC, because again, we understand where the motivation to do this is coming from, but what really interests me is what they chose to do with those funds. This is a free major update that expands on Basim's story, and it introduces a stunning region called Alula. I think it's like a 6-hour DLC including story and side content, which is pretty nice, and it's a region that's 50% architecture or dense city environments and then 50% nature and desert, which is a much more equitable split from the 80-20 that we have in the main game. This is obviously mainly because the location it's set in kind of needs that, but also because it's much more cost efficient to make video game spaces that are non-urban. Like making vast mission areas and game locations in nature is just so much cheaper and so much more accessible than building, urban environments. And the story apparently takes place before the end of the game, which I'm personally not the biggest fan of. I think, like, even though any more story that we get about Basim I'm all for, I really would have liked to see him after the decisions he makes and who he becomes at the end of the game, and what those first few months are like for someone like Basim and who he becomes, perhaps meeting characters that could set up the journey to Valhalla. But alas, more Basim is always great, so I don't mind that it's before the end of the game anyways. Now, beyond the story and the content and everything that's being added, here's what's really cool and really interesting about this DLC that speaks to kind of where Bordeaux's mind is, but maybe where Ubisoft's mind is as well. They've doubled down on the philosophy of making a game that is by AC fans and for AC fans. There are supposed to be new black box missions that kind of already exist in Assassin's Creed Mirage, and you can replay those missions in the base game as well. There's going to be some cool filters and generally just like quality of life improvements across the board. And even more impressively than this, they're adding even more parkour improvements. There are 3 major parkour improvements that I'm aware of, but if I've missed any, please let me know in the comments. These come from like the original parkour improvements that I and some other content creators talked to Ubisoft about with AC Shadows, that I think they've spoken to people like Rob about to implement into AC Mirage and the Assassin's Creeds moving forward. The first thing that they've added is a manual jump, or what they call a free jump. Now this one I think needs a little bit of nuance and needs to be explained properly, because I've seen a lot of people saying that the manual jump is returning, and it may be true that it is, but the way I understand it, it's not really a manual jump, but rather a free vertical jump that allows Basim to hop onto surfaces that are above him and that he otherwise couldn't. Of course, I may be wrong, and maybe someone like Ropotopoulos can elucidate us a bit as to what it really is, if it's a manual jump or this kind of free jump that they already added into Shadows, but that's what it is, or that's what it seems. It seems like a similar thing to what they have in Assassin's Creed Shadows, where it just improves the vertical jump that characters can use to latch onto architecture. So I doubt that it's true that it's like a non-contextual manual jump, but again, I may be wrong, and after all, a win is a win. Next, they added side ejects and back ejects that are context-free. So these are really cool ejects that don't work depending on the distance or the height that you are from a building. That gives you much more freedom when it comes to movement, and especially if you combine them with like catch ledge, or if you don't have catch ledge in the game, then at least if you have a consistent distance that Basim travels every time, you can start to predict what buildings he'll reach and what buildings he won't reach. And that's a pretty big improvement when you're trying to engage with a parkour system in a city that's already pretty well designed. So I think it can give a brand new level of freedom as to how Basim moves about. And we've been asking for contextless ejects since time immemorial. But beyond the fact that this is like an exciting addition regardless to finally have these kinds of ejects, what I find really interesting is the way they have chosen to implement it with a specific back eject and side eject mode. And that to me is what I really want to talk about in this video, because this bleeds into the third element, which is they've added like a control scheme option for modern or classic controller layout, which is more similar to how old ACs used to be, and you can start engaging with the sprint and the ejects in a much more natural way. But I don't know if any of you guys remember this, but there's a very old video by lowkey, which I recommend you all watch, where he talks about his dream Assassin's Creed game. And like most fans in that circle, he discussed how, you want better parkour and stealth and assassin iconography, and the story to revolve around assassin and templars and reflect those themes properly in gameplay and story, and so on and so forth. But one thing that he suggested that I always thought was really interesting, but very unlikely to happen, is that he suggested there be different difficulty modes for parkour. Just how starting in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you have difficulty modes for exploration, stealth, and combat. You offer a guided mode for those who don't want to engage with the parkour system in a complex way. And then you can choose to remove those guardrails for those who do. This to me seemed like such an interesting and natural idea, considering where Ubisoft in the gaming industry as a whole was going. And I believe that this is what we're starting to see with this edition. I think this is the philosophy that Bordeaux adopted for something like no context ejects. If it can work well, and this edition is well received and is not kind of like imposing more difficult parkour on players who just want to shut their brain off and move forward, I believe Ubisoft could not only prioritize parkour more, which is something that they're very clearly doing and are very clear that they're going to keep doing in future games now that they can transport all this new tech into the new games, and doing that has given them a lot of great press, but they're doing it in a way that doesn't compromise where the gaming industry is going as a whole. The gaming industry is pushing constantly for more streamlined mechanics wherever possible, especially for movement, because it's the first thing that you engage with, and you want to make it simple and easy to learn so there are no barriers to pick up and play the game, so that the basic thing of moving in a game is the thing that you can do as easy as possible and have fun doing. And despite what Assassin's Creed represents for player expression, or what some of the more hardcore fans would want, most players in the general mass market kind of wants a more streamlined gaming experience in most of their games, or at least this is where games are going regardless. Games have become more and more accessible to capture more and more market. Not everyone who plays AC gives a fuck about non-contextual height gaining ejects or catch ledge or the old style of parkouring by holding R2, or even values manual jumping in games. But to me, this edition seems like a worthwhile attempt by Ubisoft to see if they can try this kind of like quote-unquote guided mode that lowkey talked about all those years ago, where you can choose how free the parkour system is. For me, it's a really exciting prospect if they keep it, because it could keep the identity and value of the depth of the parkour in AC while keeping that mass appeal for those who don't care for that kind of depth in movement. And that's what I find so interesting about this whole DLC. Serendipity and fate placed additional funds in the hands of Bordeaux, and they made decisions based on years of fan feedback, dedicating time to develop all of this and giving it to us for free. And I can only hope that this is a new precedent for the future of AC, that all these new things that they're testing, like the guided mode or the eject free mode or whatever it is, bleeds into the future ACs, and we have an option where, just like with stealth and combat and exploration, we can choose our difficulty mode for parkour. And I really hope that this is the beginning of it. So again, another W from Bordeaux. Let me know in the comments if I've missed anything in the updates that I've been seeing, and if you're excited for the DLC and honestly for the future of AC when it comes to parkour.